Hello, peeps and creeps, and welcome to Fright Club. Happy Halloween week, everyone. I'm here with director Christopher Griffiths and producer Gary Smart to talk about their brand new horror documentary, Pennywise, The Story of It, which was released this past Monday in the UK and is currently available to buy on Blu-ray, DVD, and digital download. So please go out and buy it now if you can. Hey guys, how's it going? Thanks for joining me today.
Hello,
Thank you very much, mate.
Good, thank you. How are you guys doing? You's all right?
Yeah, just a bit of a whirlwind, obviously, with the release the last few days. So, yeah, great.
No, just thanks very much for taking the time out of your busy schedule and chatting to me. I know it was a bit short notice, so I really appreciate you coming on and giving me your time. You've been super busy promoting Pennywise documentary, and you've been busy with another brand new documentary, which we'll talk about later on in the video, about the legendary Robert Englund, but we'll get into that a little bit later. But we're here to talk about Pennywise right now. I loved the documentary. I gave it 5 stars and called it an astonishingly remarkable deep dive into one of the most beloved cult horror films of the last few decades and an amazing celebration of one of horror's most iconic villains. Is that hitting the nail on the head there?
That's very generous. So thank you. Yeah.
Good. No,
that's one of the better ones.
I thought that sounded quite good, so I wanted to get it in there.
Yeah. That's definitely a poster quote. Definitely.
Good. Well, feel free to use that if you want anytime. Wow. I have no qualms about that at all. First and foremost, what are your thoughts on the reaction of the documentary so far? Because it's been very, very positive.
Chris, you go first.
That's you guys. I'll go first.
Yeah, we'll take it in turns. You go first. I'll go next.
So yeah, really, really happy how it's gone down. It's I'd say primarily been positive, and it's not like there's not been, there's obviously been some criticisms here and there. Admittedly, for me personally, I don't take them personally. Mm-hmm. It's not hard to argue with some points. And when I say it's hard to not argue, I wouldn't say so much that it's like, oh yeah, I absolutely agree with you. But it's just me kind of understanding, well, of course, you're not the audience for this. Mm-hmm. What was kind of quite, a whirlwind for us is we've actually had our first review in Total Film magazine, which is like, oh my god, the magazine my old man's been reading this whole time, and we got a nice fair 3 stars, and then they say, at times that there's areas of the documentary which are a bit, maybe long and bloated, but I don't take that personally. I kind of, I'm not saying I necessarily agree with it, but you're never going to please every single person. So in terms of the fans, certainly horror fans, definitely the It fans, I think everyone's really happy with what they've got. I think maybe just to a general audience, it might be like, okay, this might be a bit long in places, but it's a challenge you're always going to face with these documentaries because, how much is too much in a way. But at the end of the day, what the fans crave is every single detail. You'll get called upon by the audiences that this is designed for if you miss some things. So, but for the most part, anyway, I digress. It has been great to sort of see, the positive reviews we've been getting, and certainly from yourselves as well.
Good.
Yeah, like Chris just said, I think for us as filmmakers, and we've been working on the project for 5 years, it's kind of difficult sometimes to kind of separate yourself from the process of making a project like this. Particularly, obviously, it's been a long 5-year journey, and the last probably year has been a really fast kind of roller coaster in terms of obviously distribution and obviously finding some partners and whatnot. So to finally sit back and actually see the reaction from fans, it has been brilliant for us, really. And as Chris said, it's always difficult to please everybody. When you're dealing with a cast of, principal cast of about 15, 16 people. It's obviously with the children, obviously the adults and obviously as children as well, but also then obviously with Tim and the bullies, it's always going to be a really hard thing. It's not like most of your films you've got a very small cast and crew. So I'm really, really happy with it. I think we've got some fantastic reviews, and obviously it's really proud of where we are today.
Tell us a little bit about Dead Mouse Productions and Cult Screenings and how it all sort of came together and how it all started.
Yeah, so we kind of started 10 years ago. It was. So I was invited to a screening of Night of the Living Dead in a little theatre in Birmingham, and I was kind of going there as a guest. It was a Halloween about 10 years ago. Yes, so I was going as a guest to talk about obviously zombie films. I was told that the screening was sold out. And I tried to back out a bit. I was like, I've got to go. I turn up and there's 3 people in the audience. So I had to give his talk with 3 people. Anyway, and then because of that, I got talking to the organisers, and basically said, I knew an actor called Don Kaufer from Return of the Living Dead, who played Ernie, and I was like, I could get him over in the UK, do a screening, and we got him over, and it was a sellout screening, and Chris came as a punter to that screening. And we, Chris was a bit cheeky and asked, could he have a kind of one-to-one private session with Don backstage because he had to get a train home. That's a better story than your story, Chris. So we took him backstage, met Don, and I kind of liked Chris straight away. I don't know what it was about him. It kind of, he was a horror fan, but not your typical horror fan. I've got a lot of horror fan friends, and they've got a particular look to them. Chris didn't have that. Chris, he had other attributes of a horror fan. But
wow, you just completely shunted our audience now, Gary. What's he actually saying about us?
No, you know what I mean. And I think he didn't come in a horror t-shirt.
No.
He didn't come with tattoos. He was very kind of a normal guy sitting there, but he was very passionate about film. I got friendly with him. We added each other on Facebook, as you do. Got friendly. And we did a screening of Hellraiser, and he couldn't be asked to turn up to that. So then we did another screening of Manhunter with Brian Cox, nice. the original Brian Cox, not Professor Brian Cox. And obviously and I knew that Chris was a huge fan of Manhunter. So I asked Chris, could he do the Q&A? And Chris turned up. There's another story behind that when Chris got there with the other organisers. But anyway, and then we then decided to do our own documentary on Hellraiser because I got friendly with some of the cast and crew. We'd met some, I would call them filmmakers in Birmingham, but it's very loose terms. And they got on board. Well, one of them was brilliant, one of them wasn't. They got on board and started working on Leviathan with us. And I asked, I basically said, let's get Chris on board, do some additional interviews and some research. Chris got on board. Subsequently, we then ended up sacking that director. And then Chris took over. Chris was
we sound like such a swell bunch of guys. Yes. Fucked over this guy. No, then he fucked over that one. But
it was more about the passion, really. I think on these projects, you've got to have a passion for the subject matter. You've got to know subject matter. You've got to be wanting to do it, and you've got to want to commit yourself to actually making the best possible product for the fans, because we're fans. And there were some creative differences. Chris came on board and was very passionate. And I think the good thing about Chris on Hellraiser was he wasn't a Hellraiser fan at the time, so he could look at it from an objective point of view as a film and how that film was made, and obviously especially special effects, stuff like that. And then he became a fan. So, and that just snowballed. Then we ended up creating Dead Mouse Productions and Cult Screenings, and that was 10 years ago. So we've had a very long journey. I've probably aged a lot better than Chris, yeah, I mean, I met Chris when I was like 30, now I'm 40. It's like, Jesus Christ, it's such a long time ago. And obviously, Adam Evans is obviously our co-director of the company. So the company's owned by me, Chris, and Adam. And that's kind of a very, very whistle-stop, very quick tour of obviously how Dead Mouse and Cult Screenings came about. But it was through luck, really, and just circumstance. Just someone turned to a screening one day, and then this is where we are today.
Amazing, just passionate horror fans wanting to do stuff in the genre, and you came together, and it's amazing that you came together just through your passion of the films. Chris, did you want to add any of your stories to that then, or maybe you're not allowed to say?
This one time, Gary, right? No, it's pretty much like Gary said. And I was saying to someone the other day, I think at the moment, I think I'm kind of going through a phase at the moment. I think all of us are a bit feeling a bit like imposter syndrome. We're being invited to your interview. We're doing this with this person. I've got people coming out to me going, "Oh, can I get a photo with you?" And I do things to myself like, "Why the fuck would you want a photo with me?" Objectively speaking, you're the guys who did the Fright Night documentary. I'm like, yeah, but there's the Fright Night cast over there. That's what you want. It's like unbelievably flattering. But Gary's saying it's 10 years, and we kind of got quite a strong start. And we're still, as I speak, we're still all in our full-time jobs, which is a little bit of an Achilles heel, but life. And we've kind of had not peaks and troughs. I suppose we have had peaks and troughs, but we kind of had the 1-2 punch almost within about a span of 2-3 years of the Hellraiser documentary and then the Fright Night documentary. And then Chris got his way by saying, "I want to do a RoboCop documentary," and then that was kind of like the start of I wouldn't
the
say
end.
Tumultuous. But I mean, we kind of thought at times "Oh, well, that's it," because think we bit off more than we can chew with RoboDoc. And then, yeah, probably not doing ourselves favors. We've kind of collected so many interviews for so many projects. So 2016 was shooting RoboDoc. We went over with the intention of having, oh God, what was it? 50. I think we had 15 people confirmed. We came back with 60 people filmed. And then we subsequently had 40 other people filmed for all 3 films in the series. So it's the gospel according to RoboCop we've got there. And then we did Pennywise with co-director John Campopiano the following year because it's the project he brought to us. Or we also came together from different ways on Pennywise, which we can go into. And then Gary's gone and done Police Academy interviews and everything. So we've got this massive backlog now. And it's a good thing we do, I think. You know, it feels really stingy, like, yeah, we've got all the interviews, so there's no point anyone else doing it. The good news is, though, as I said, that now that a lot has changed for us in the last year or two, that's like, oh my God, it's like we're entering a new phase, really, isn't it? I think, you know, working recently, we've not collaborated as much, Gary and I, on a project, certainly with Robert Englund, since, God, 2014 when we were doing Leviathan. So it's great. And I think it's great. It's great that, you know, I feel like we almost deserve what's happening now. As modest as that might sound, we've really gone through some periods where it's like, maybe it is just a hobby. Maybe it is just something we just did for us. Yes, we've got a DVD out there, but now it's a bit like, oh, holy shit. You know, even our backlog of work's starting to get recognized now. People going, oh, you did the Hellraiser documentary. It's like, yeah. We tried to tout it out at the time, but so, yeah, it's just been a really mad journey. You've definitely caught us in a kind of like weird transitional, great, exciting, but at the same time, a bit like,
yeah,
moment,
scary.
I think for us,
scary times ahead, but exciting for you.
100%, man.
I saw the Leviathan documentary on Shudder. Actually, it was on Shudder.
He was
UK.
for a while, yeah.
Yeah, wasn't it? Fantastic documentary, amazing documentary. That was the first one that I kind of saw, and then I started hearing about the Dead Mouse productions and all that sort of stuff, and it got me excited about the Pennywise whenever I first seen all the information that came out about it last year. You also mentioned the RoboDoc one. Now it's in production. It's not finished yet, or how far along are you?
So it is. I can confidently say it's finished in terms of there's an end-to-end product. Okay. Certainly a hot topic for us quite frequently, and you know we try and be as transparent as we can with this whole thing. I think we have to a certain degree with fans online and that. As I said, I feel like it's my fault. The one project I happen to choose is the one that ends up being like, oh Jesus, this really is the bastard child of Deadmau5, isn't it?
Yeah,
but it just exploded. It started off as, I think, I'm able to say what it is now. Yeah, but it started off as like, let's do a 90-minute retrospective on RoboCop. I love the film. And in terms of our choices of documentaries, we always try and tackle an area, corner an area of the market that hasn't been done. So there's no point doing Friday the 13th, no point doing Nightmare on Elm Street, and to a certain degree, I think Halloween, because they've all had their standalone documentaries. And RoboCop had a few featurettes, same for Hellraiser and Fright Night. And it was like, let's do a 90-minute retrospective. We'll get a couple people. I've got a rough idea. And as I said, we went over with 15 people confirmed, came back with 60. And the problem is, someone knows someone. Well, let's get them in. Someone else knows someone else. And I think we were there for about 4 weeks in the States. And none of us had a can. Normally, I get a nice I'm as red as your shirt.
It was also Chris then going, hang on a minute, there's so-and-so. I want to speak to so-and-so. So it was a bit of both, I think, as well. Suddenly these names, these lists started appearing on my desk going, oh, we need to introduce person. We have to introduce person. Mm-hmm. Chris, but that we ain't got to, we've got to interview these 15 extra people.
But it worked, so what that turned into now is that what was supposed to be a 90-minute documentary on, or 2 hours on primarily the first film. Let's cover a little bit of the sequel and the third film as well, which we do clearly state in the Kickstarter video. I can sort of back up there. We've now got a 4-hour documentary on RoboCop 1 alone.
My God.
And we can justify this because we're going through a bit of a phase at the moment where we are starting to learn, long-form documentaries are very popular for genre fans. You've got a 7-hour documentary on Friday the 13th, etc. But yeah, for one film, 4 hours, However, what was supposed to be just a retrospective with all the materials we actually collated, hopefully I can confidently say it's going to be the first of its kind. It's been like the most arduous ones put together. I'm just hoping it's the one that really does kind of like break the mold in that it actually covers like the whole pre-production really in depth. and then we actually go through the film scene by scene. And it's almost, I
Wow.
know you can
Okay.
get like Blu-ray features, can't you, where it's like the little screen in the corner pops up as a bit like a visual commentary. But this is like as all singing, all dancing as you could possibly imagine. And we just realized, like, oh my God, we've got the girl who's nearly raped by the two guys in the alleyway. We've got one of the would-be
Right.
rapists. Sadly, not the one who gets his dick blown off.
Okay.
We got Bixby Snyder. So we pretty much got like everyone's, and then we realized, like, holy shit, we've actually got a documentary where we dissect the film scene by scene. And we've just like the amount of behind it, which is one of our favorite things with these documentaries, is collecting the behind the scenes content, finding those photos that no one's ever seen before. And you know, I think with everything we've done now, we can clearly distinguish, like, oh, yeah, of course you can find that on Google versus holy shit, I've never seen that photo from behind the scenes. So we've made sure we've got a plethora of stuff there. So we've got a 4-hour documentary on the first film. I think with the wealth of content we've got a 2-hour documentary on the second film, and about approximately 90 minutes on the third film. Which, hey, we all know what RoboCop 3 is, but there's certainly some interesting, you know, heartfelt stories to be told about it, I think, which is great. And then about 40 minutes on the series, I think. So it's, as I said, I doubt there's going to be a need for a RoboCop documentary ever again after this, but it's just been a bit of a rough ride.
Yeah, I think as well, one thing, you know, which I don't think people realise, is that we spent 5 years trying to get Peter Weller. Literally, we never gave up on Weller. And I think people don't realise that. You know, that was literally, there's no word of lie, 5 years of emails, phone calls. You know, so and so speaks to him for us, that person. So we finally, you know, harassed him ourselves in person to get him to agree. And you know, and if we would have just rushed it out 3 or 4 years ago, Weller wouldn't have been in it. So I know it's taken a long time. There's been other reasons why that's taken a long time, but the fact that we've actually got him now, we've got a full house. You know, I think that for me justifies the wait, to be honest, for ourselves as filmmakers. And as Chris said, depending on obviously when this goes out, this podcast, there is going to be an announcement literally in the next 2 weeks of how people are going to see it, how it's going to be released. We're really excited. We just want to tell people because it's just going to, you know, we still get people to this day strangely going, this is a con. This is never going to happen.
Yeah.
You know, you've run off of our money. We've invested about £90,000 so far of our own money, not just Kickstarter money, of our own company money in this project. So that's why, you know, I think there's been lots of tears and tantrums because it's a lot of money to invest in something which hasn't come out yet. So as a company, we want it out. So hopefully, you know, there's going to be an announcement in the next couple of weeks, and people are going to be really happy. I hope, as Chris said, it's going to be, you know, as Chris just alluded to, it's going to be three parts. In the sense of three different releases. So, you know, it's going to be a nice journey. And I've always said, you know, it's not a documentary, it's an experience. This documentary is, it literally is it's going to feel like you're on the set with these people. It's a, you know, it's a scene by scene dissection. It's not a traditional documentary. So that will hopefully, you know, appease a lot of people.
Sounds amazing.
We have to throw credit as well because the co-director on that as well actually is Eastwood Allen, who's been working on it with us. And my editing's got very good lately. That sounds very modest, right? But here's the context. My editing's got really good. And every time I'm like, look at that fancy animation I can do. And look what I did on Pennywise and this and that. I think I'm catching up to Eastwood, my co-director, right? Go onto his Twitter, and he's just done a willy-nilly bloody post, you know, just like, oh, quick little animation, celebrate the anniversary of RoboCop. I'm like, fuck. And so thanks to kind of all the sort of, you know, co-directing this with him and sort of the styles of music we're going with this, like, you know, we've got synthwave bands who supply this music, like, you know, legit bands like Gunship and whatnot, awesome. And the animations and everything, like, it's like nothing else. I think you can definitely see a step mass production, but good. I mean, like, I'm very excited to sort of see how people. I think we just want to make sure we get out quick enough, to be honest, before anyone tries to, which I think there might be already out there. People try to copy out this particular style of documentary because, you know, it's got to be, no, we were there first. I mean, look when we started production. Shit, I actually, didn't have any grey hairs randomly growing at that point, but yeah, I mean, I'm quite lucky in the dark right now.
So you're saying it's going to be worth the wait then?
Well, if it isn't, Chris is going to be 6 feet under, to be honest. I'm blaming Chris.
Good. No, happy days. Hopefully we'll get it soon enough and it'll be definitely worth the wait. So we are here to talk about Pennywise. I know we went off on a bit of a tangent there. But before we get into the documentary, I wanted to hear a little bit more about each of your initiation into the horror genre. Like growing up, what kind of films scared you, and what films made you want to get into the industry?
For me,
Sure.
I started my horror kind of journey when I was very, very young. So obviously in the UK, we have obviously reception class in year one. I know for a fact when year one, I was borrowing videos to my friends on Nightmare on Elm Street 2 and Elm Street 1 and Return of the Living Dead. So, it was it's always been air horror for me. And it came from my granddad, to be honest, who was an avid horror fan. He'd have loads of books in his house of obviously horror stuff. But he also had this kind of thing where he would go to a video store, rent a video, and then pirate it, and then create his own case. Where I always remember the cases on his shelf used to be the standard black case, but in where obviously the sleeve should be was a film review taken from the paper. So that's how you'd get your videos from granddad. So I got into the horror then, with Not on Elm Street being a huge influence on me. I wasn't scared of horror. It was really weird because obviously I loved, horror films, and my granddad had all these books of special effects in there and the makeups. I kind of knew, who was who in the films. So even before the internet, I knew who Robert Englund was, and I knew who, John Carpenter was, and stuff like that. The only film that really scared me as a kid, weirdly, was Pet Cemetery, and it was only that one scene with Tommy Bateman when he's digging up the flashback scene when Judd's telling the story, and he just turn around with that bloody child's leg in his hand, and just the look of him, I don't know what it was, it just scared the shit out of me as a kid. But yeah, so that's my kind of journey to horror. It's always been there. It's always been part of my life. It's always been a huge part. And meeting Chris, obviously somebody who appreciated it from a filmmaking point of view as well as a fandom, obviously was perfect sync with me. So yeah, that's my quick story. Chris have gone for 4 hours now, so
do it. Go ahead, man.
What are you on about? I didn't even come prepared. This is probably where it started for me, and I'd say it's this exact box is where there was a tipping point for me when it came to horror. I keep that as a kind of thing to remind me where it all started. But I think, like Gary, it was not always in my life. I think it kind of initially started as a kid. It's all your Ghostbusters. I mean, kids stuff back in the day used to actually have some bite to it. I mean, I don't really know what the lay of the land is like now. So I was always into that kind of spooky stuff. And then I think it was around the time my parents split up. You could tell my mum was the strong arm of the law, and whereas I'd go to my old man's house and he'd be like, "Oh, I'm just gonna chuck this on," kind of thing. And I had to keep it quiet from my mother. And I'd tell a lie. It started with Chainsaw Massacre 2. He had, because it was banned, both ends, wasn't it? I think for you guys over there and for us in the UK. And so, I think we watched Chainsaw Massacre 2 first on a Pirate Touch video. It was scary, but quite thrilling. And then he put that on one day, that exact copy, which was the pre-certificate one. And it's the first time I ever truly felt I was probably 8 years old, to be fair. But I really felt like something drop inside me. So the bar was set quite high, to be honest, from the get-go. So it's been quite hard. It's been a struggle to find anything that's given me that kind of thrill since. And, I kind of laughed with my mum about it. You get this sense kids watching horror films turn into serial killers, and I just want to be there going, well, excuse me, man. But I do have my kinks. But I think, that's kind of really where it started, was with that. And then, of course, it's just that. I think the beauty of the one thing I always say is it's all our age group. I feel almost privileged in so many ways to be of a certain age, in that, I used to enjoy the hunt for finding films on VHS. Go to a grotty market, and you'd go with a little list. You'd have to obviously get Dad to do the purchase, but if they got Evil Dead there, and he would always tell me, no, don't bother with Evil Dead. Evil Dead 2 is where it's at, and don't bother buying the VHS. It's cut to shreds. One day it's going to be out in widescreen and uncut. And I'll be like, it's not going to be out uncut in widescreen. So, 400 DVD releases later, and you can pretty much go and get it free with a paper now, can't you? So I think that's maybe it's talking about time and luck. I think it's the age group that we're in, that we all got to experience these films, whereas now it's just pop it on Netflix or purchase a VOD, which is great, but it was the hunt. That's the thing I miss the most. And I don't know where it'll go from now. I'm curious to see how certain kids will experience horror the way we all might have, to be honest, back then. And it just became addictive, really, pre-internet. Like Gary reading up stuff in, what was it, Time Out film guides.
Mm-hmm.
And I think most mates think it's a party trick who are not necessarily into film. Go randomly flick a page and go, Griff, who's the director of, and what year did such and such come out? And I'm like bloody Rain Man then. So yeah, still am. So yeah, that was the long and the long.
Yeah, it's great now because you have Netflix, you have Shudder, you have all these streaming channels. It's so easy to find stuff now, but there was something special about going into a video store and going to that horror section and trying to search for something and hoping that they had it in because they only maybe had 4 or 5 copies of a
But
VHS.
it was also the cover art, wasn't it? Back in the day, you know, the film could be absolutely shit, but as long as cover art was good, you don't get that on Netflix now. You just get a little crappy still from the film. Sometimes it's completely irrelevant, you know, clip what they've put on there, and it's like, well, why you put that picture on that person who's in it for about 10 seconds? It doesn't even give the film away.
Yeah,
I just love being the VHS, which said going into a grotty little seedy one, and then literally just searching through like Graham Humphrey's kind of VHS covers and just going, that looks really amazing. You know, that zombie's got its boobs out on the cover. Let's go and buy that. And it's like you don't get that now. And I think as Chris said, I don't know what. I mean, you look at Terrifier. Terrifier has become huge. Terrifier 2 because of word of mouth. You know our word of mouth is completely different because the word of mouth is actually people talking, whereas word of mouth now is a few articles online about people being sick in the cinema, and it's gone great for those guys because we know some of the filmmakers that made that. But our word of mouth was the playground, and it was like it was going around your mate's house and going, "Have you ever seen Return of the Living Dead? Have you ever seen Chainsaw Massacre?" I never seen. Well, this is what happens, and I've got the VHS. You know, that now it's so easy to go, and there's a clip on YouTube, or that's the goriest scene. So, and I think sometimes you create scenes in your head never existed. I know there's definitely films where I watch them now and go, I'm sure that happened in the film. I think your mind creates it.
Yeah.
That's probably where Chris's like sociopathic tendencies come in, Ben, is creating a different reality for himself. But so I think same as Chris. I think we're from a great generation, and you've probably lost that now.
Yeah, there's a wee bit lost today, but oh well. We sound like really old men talking about fucking back in the day,
during the war.
I know. So anyway, Pennywise. What was it specifically about Pennywise and it that made you want to explore the film and that world? Was it Stephen King or was it the film itself?
For me, it was Tim Curry, 100%.
Okay.
It was Tim. I just think growing up, I mean, I'm a big fan of Stephen King, but I'm not an aficionado of Stephen King. I like his films. I've read it when I was a kid, and I read Pet Sematary. I tried to start The Shining, but I just couldn't. As a teenager, trying to get into that book was difficult. But for me, it was always Tim Curry. I think the first time we probably discussed it with me and Chris, it was like, if we can't get Tim, we won't do it. But also we knew Tommy Lee Wallace and Bart Mixon, so that kind of helped that for us. I'm sure Chris will go into that in more detail. So it wasn't King for me, it was Tim, and that's why when we didn't get Stephen King for the documentary, it didn't bother me, and it's in hindsight saying it now, but Tim, Tommy and Bart was most important things in that project, not so much Stephen King, because it's I think it's their film. Obviously it wouldn't be there without Stephen King, but it's their movie. So that was it for me.
Good. Chris?
I suppose, following up on that, as Gary said, I suppose on the Stephen King topic, with every project, we always have, is that one we couldn't get? We had it with Clive Barker on Hellraiser. We were very close to having him. With obviously Robodoc, it took us 5 years to get Weller. And so inevitably, I suppose our mindset was with Pennywise, who's going to be the one we don't get? And agreeing with Gary, I think, if we didn't get Tim Curry, whether we wouldn't have gone through with it, I don't know, but it would have been a massive, massive gap. But it all kind of started. I mean, for me, I like the film. I saw it quite late in the day, admittedly, and when you have Chainsaw Massacre as your baseline at 8 years old, to watch nearly anything else, down the line is a bit like, okay, it's, doesn't give me that thrill. I've grown a bit like ours. I've grown a massive appreciation now for it, because God knows I've probably watched it about 20 times, in the span of production. Just that, let's go back through and watch it, in terms of what areas of the documentary covering. But it kind of all started really with, I suppose what was quite funny, this is why I don't do the admin shit. I think once we had done the Fright Night documentary, as Gary said, we interviewed Bart Nixon, and Bart Nixon has just been everywhere. He was on RoboCop, he's on Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2, he's now doing Marvel films, so Pennywise is his baby, as alluded in the talk. And we'd worked with him on Fright Night. And I think, as I'd said before about collecting all this archive material, he keeps a lot of stuff. You know, he's very proud of his work. So to anyone who wants to explore that, it's an absolute treasure trove. And so when I think he told us around the time of doing Fright Night Part 2 documentary, I've got a bunch of photos, I've got videos from behind the scenes that I've never seen the light of day. So it's like, ooh. Cut to a couple of weeks, maybe months later, I got a message off a random bloke called John saying, "Oh, hi, I do documentaries, and I see you guys have. I heard you guys have met Bart, and would you be interested in doing the Stephen King's It documentary?" And I never got back to him. I'm one of those people. I'm like, "Oh shit, that message I never got back to is gone. Ah, crap." So John made the right call to actually get in touch with Gary, which made much more sense. And then that's when I was like, "Oh God, that guy messaged me as well." And so it kind of started. And then obviously, with this particular project, Stephen King's It is a massive thing for John. So that's what he was obviously gun ho with going it. And for us, it was a bit more for me at least. It was a bit more from a pragmatic side of okay, actually. That film hasn't had its dues in terms of having a making of. I think up to this point, still officially, it's only had the audio commentary that came with the DVD and Blu-ray. So it was like, right, there's a gap in the market. It is huge. It's a very popular film. Tim Curry, I echo Gary, he's one of the biggest horror icons, despite not having a whole franchise. He's sat right behind you now. I can see Gav. And, he's an iconic image. He's one of the horror icons. So to be able to sort of have, imagine in our roster, like, oh my God, we've got Pinhead, we've got Pennywise, it's just all, I think, yeah, let's get him. And so, yeah, that's pretty much where it all began. I think it was just after, it was about a couple of months after we got back from shooting Robodoc, I think, wasn't it? Yeah. That's right. It was like, overlap is going to happen here.
Awesome. Yeah. You mentioned your co-director, John, there. Am I right in saying he has a screen used costume of Pennywise? Does he have that in his collection?
He's got two.
He's got two of them.
But yeah. We were on yeah. That guy's got a knack, you see, for acquiring things because he's an archivist. So
right,
there just must be a knack for it, which I'm missing. I like to think I'm personable and chat to people and friendly and whatever, but I might speak to someone and say, "Hey, sorry, just inquiring. Do you have any photos? Do you have any videos? Do you have anything you can share with us for this documentary?" No. A couple of days later, John, I just spoke to that person. They gave me. So he's got a knack for getting that kind of stuff.
Okay.
And we had the costume designer, Monique Prudhomme, came to her interview. She actually brought along with her the Pennywise costume.
Wow.
And so it's like, we can do some B-roll with that, and she can talk about it in the documentary and explain it. And right at the end, she just went, "Do you want it?" And it's just like, what the? When is someone going to offer me a fucking Robocop outfit? I mean, it's not going to be easy. It's not going to be easy to kind of get back to the UK, but I'm sure I can make it work. I think actually saying that, the casting director that works on the Robocop series is like, "I've just given away a Robocop helmet." It's like, so yes, he now possesses though that suit. And I don't know where was this second one. So I think the second one's like the stunt suit, isn't it? Which is a bit broader and a bit more flexible. Yeah. So yeah, he's. I mean, I've got my Robocop toys in the background over there. There's a meal made by Gary. But yeah, I haven't had that moment yet where someone goes, "Hey, here you go, Chris."
We don't beg.
We're too polite and British.
Yeah, I know how that feels. Yeah, you don't want to be begging. You don't want to sound like a pure fanboy, really, but we are.
That's the hardest thing that we do now because you can't go in there wanting autographs. It's like you're sitting next to these people and you don't want to. So we're very clever. We're getting to sign a poster and say, it's part of it's part of the production because and we have need to photograph you as part of the production behind the scenes because you just don't want to. It is very difficult to not be a fanboy in Tim's house and obviously I'm a big fan of Ronnie Cox and Chris obviously is Kurtwood Smith and Weller himself. So it's always difficult, but you got to separate yourself a little bit sometimes from that kind of world because at the end of the day, you don't want to piss people off.
No,
you got to come across as filmmakers as well as passionate fans, but not obviously the passionate fans who want to skin Peter Weller alive and wear his skin. So
I'm sure there's some fans out there that do want to do that.
I don't think any of us would fit in Peter Weller's skin, so we're okay.
So when it comes
go ahead, man.
So I was just going to say, like, obviously you mentioned being huge fans. You talked about Tim Curry there, Tommy Lee Wallace. Outside of those two, of all the people that you interviewed, who was sort of the most interesting or your favorite interviewee?
That's so hard. So hard because so many people and there's different experience, you know. But people always ask questions as well, like they go, "What's the most interesting thing you found out?" And it's like it's really hard to answer that because it's like we did so much. But I mean, on Pennywise itself, I really liked Brandon Crane, and I think I liked him because I liked him more when we were having a drink with him. You know, the interview, he was a really kind of like fun guy, real kind of witty sense of humor. So I really liked him. I thought he was a really good lad. But then everybody else was as well. So it's hard to choose one person. You know, we went to
a lot of good moments we had.
Yeah,
like some really good moments. I mean, like it was Belch as well, Chris Eastman.
Yeah.
It's just weird. I suppose what you get when you're doing all these documentaries is I don't think we've necessarily had anything to rough to wade through in the way of personalities, but sometimes you've got the thoughtful one, you've got the educated one, you've got the humorous one, and they all bring different things to the table, and it's just that balance of want to have a conversation with them, but at the same time I need to get this kind of information out of you, basically. So really, I suppose, echoing Gary, I'll go with I'll say with Brandon as well. What's great, is you're doing a job when you're doing an interview with these people. You do develop a relationship, because if you sat there talking to them for an average about 2 hours, you're going to build a bond. But we were lucky enough to go out for a drink with Brandon on that same day, I think, weren't we? We've kind of remained, not constantly, but not consistently, but we've remained in touch with him because he's got a podcast he's just started up himself now, Brandon.
Cool.
And so it's just great to still be able to talk to some of these people. And I think this is the one thing we always say as well, Gary and I, with all these projects. Maybe early days, we thought oh my God, I'm friends with so-and-so now. I'm friends with this person and that person. I mean, God knows I say to my wife all the time, whenever a film's on TV, I'm like, look, babe, it's my mate. My mate. She's like, no, it's not your mate. It's like, okay. And I think in this early days, we might have kind of been in that mindset, we know him now, so therefore, I can call him up whenever I want. Not that we ever did, but these days it is just like walking that fine line between, hey, that was good doing that job with you, see you soon, kind of thing. Completely different story, I think, these days for a certain Mr. Kruger. But yeah, that's the fine line you've got, really. But it's great to remain in touch with these people, to be honest. And they've been incredibly supportive since as well. So
they have, yeah.
That really doesn't answer your question. But
there's just so many
different things to the tables.
There's so many people, as you said, Dennis Christopher, he was great. All the kids were great. Obviously, they're not kids anymore; they're older than me. They were all great. But it's difficult. We didn't have any. I mean, the one interview I always found the most kind of, apart from obviously Tim, was kind of like what hit home a little bit about obviously someone's career was obviously Michael Cole, who played the old Henry Bowers. I mean, he's not in the documentary much because he's not well, to be honest. So the fact that he was there being interviewed, it was just so nice to him to be there, and he struggled in the interview, but I think it was just a nice experience for him to basically celebrate his work and be part of it. I know he was really happy to be there, and that taking that away from that, somebody who really is chuffed that people are talking to him, was really kind of like cool, really, because it's like you've done something for that person, you've made their life a little bit better when they're going through a rough time. You've actually done something for them and made them feel special again.
We often say as well, actually, almost like a standard line for us, is when you've got all these films we deal with, you've got, I've got to get that person, I've got to get the lead actor or actress or, the director themselves. And don't get me wrong, I think we've lucked out on everything we've worked on in the way of directors and writers all being articulate and actually giving a damn about songs at Hellraiser. But with everything else, though, we've been lucky with really engaged directors and writers and lead actors. But the thing you always find is actually, sometimes it's the people, I don't want to call them the little people, but the smaller roles,
yeah,
individuals, smaller roles. We've had clapper loaders for certain projects. These are the people who kind of really absorbed what was going on in their world. So you don't necessarily have the credit or the grandiose, oh my God, the director. But actually, they're the ones sometimes who pay more attention when they're working on the films because it's a bigger deal for them, extras or something like that. So to be honest, it sounds awful, but really, it's all about what can you give us, And I think
we all say it's the gold, isn't it?
It's the gold dust, and so yeah, I thought it's just so many factors. It's like trying to say who's your favorite. I don't know, Marvel character. Not big
Yeah.
into Marvel massively,
Yeah.
but they all do their best in different ways.
And as well for us, we're interviewing in a 2-week, 3-week period, 60 people, and you literally it's like a conveyor belt sometimes. So it's like you get them into the kind of waiting area, you do the smoozing, straight into the chair in the studio, back out again, sign some stuff, and they go. And the next person comes in. Sometimes it's crossover as well. Sometimes you get 3 or 4 people sitting there because coming early. So it's a world experience. And it's not until after you go, shit, we had Ray Wise in just. Oh God, we had Kurtwood Smith. We had Kane Hodder, and it's like these people are like icons, and we've literally, they're just like ships of the night for us a little bit. It's like in and out, and then it's only after you go, I wish I would have asked, about that film. Why not talk about that film? Dwight Little did Halloween 4. Why did I mention that to him? Yeah.
There's an immunity I think you develop over time, which sounds really modest saying this, but we put it this way: we were in Stitches the other week, and you go down to breakfast at this hotel. You're like, fucking Dario Argento's on 2 tables over from us. Dario Argento's on 2 tables over from us. But he's like, hell, and you're like, and again, it's that same thing of like, exert yourself professionally now and amongst these people because we are filmmakers, but we're still clamoring fanboys. And I think you go off a bit into a stratosphere. I don't know. It's like when you go to a concert or something. You go off into the clouds and you're kind of not there. And I think that's the main thing I'm trying to do now these days is really make sure that I'm absorbing what's going on. I don't want to be watching something weeks down the line going, "Fuck, man, I was with that person," but at the time, I think especially with interviews, you've got a job to do, and we're very what's the word, guerrilla sometimes in our setups with the documentaries we do. It's primarily me with the camera, the sound, the lighting, and conducting the interview as well. Not to sort of take all the credit in some circumstances of this. And obviously, my worry is like, fuck, all right, hang on. Yep, sound's still working. Oh, yeah, the lighting's fine. Camera's still ticking over. Good. And so you kind of really panicked about, is this doing what it's supposed to do? And so, I think only once maybe have I been in that situation where I was so kind of focusing on everything else. I was like, great. And so how did you get involved with the film? I've just answered that question. Absolutely. I was just testing you. Fuck. So yeah, we still very much, like I said, we've met God knows how many people now. But we still are like, holy shit, it's that person. And we still very much appreciate every individual because they're working on the films we love.
Well, it's like I know
whatever they've got to say is gold to us.
It's like Chris tells a story about Lance Henriksen when he arrived. It's like we're all waiting for Lance Henriksen to arrive in the car park. And it's like, this is Lance Henriksen, this is Bishop, from
Legend.
Aliens, is Near Dark. And he's like, he gets out his car and he's deaf and blind about some woman in traffic. And he's just
fucking bitch was ahead of me on the highway. And she just fucking, he lights up a cigarette and we're just there going.
But then you realise it's just a normal man just stuck in traffic. It's not, and you get grounded then really quick. And he gives you a hug and he's like, where are we doing this? He goes upstairs. It's like, that's just, it's not it's not Bishop you're thinking of. It's not, you know what I mean? It sounds really weird because you think about the character.
But you've got to try and keep that in you a little bit because you do get to that. Okay, yeah, cool. He pisses and shits the same as us. Fantastic. Yeah. Oh my God, Near Dark, man. Just so you can appreciate it, but then don't go too far down there because otherwise you're looking at them dribbling. And he's like, does he want to eat me? Or something like that. So, we're really lucky actually.
Awesome. I suppose, well, you kind of answered my next question there, but I'll go over it again just really briefly. Was there anything that you wanted to ask any of the interviewers on this documentary or previous ones that you still regret not asking, like a specific question?
I can't remember. I can't remember anything. Go on.
I'm not sure if it's specific. I think it's more that we've definitely learned, especially doing the editing very hands-on now. You're kind of like, we're getting better at this now, but we have sort of set ourselves a mandate that our traditional format of what we do is we get everyone, and I think with Hellraiser, Gary had created, Jesus Christ, like a 5-page document per interview. And it was like, holy shit, in the end, we were like, okay, that's overkill. But still, we've got everything, that's good. We operate on that, like, let's get anything and everything possible of each individual and make, just hope that they're willing to go along with you on, okay, I'm here for 3 hours with this interview. But I think what
Yeah.
we're starting to get better with now is developing, is working on the narrative in advance, which you can't guarantee in all respects that someone's going to comply to that. But we've been quite lucky recently, actually, with the England doc, because we've actually decided there's things we want to make adjustments to, and it's always hindsight. That's been the key. I think the buzzword for the last few months, doesn't it?
Yeah.
With a lot of our questions. In hindsight, we should have done this. In hindsight, I wish that person had said something a certain way. Because when it comes to the edit, we want things. Hopefully, it shows in Pennywise. Everything flows. That person says that. It goes on to that person. It all bounces off each other. But you might watch a bit of footage and go, "Fuck! Why didn't we get them to put the context to the answer in that question?"
I think as Chris said, it's always difficult because it's a learning process. Because as Chris said on the first one, we'd interview people for 2 hours with 30, 40 questions, which we didn't need. And it was actually sometimes people telling stories which weren't even their stories, and we go, "Well, tell us what it was like to do this." And you're going, "What do we do with all this stuff?" And that's why I think you think Leviathan was 9 hours, the original version, and we had probably about 90 hours of footage on that of people talking. Really wasn't really relevant for the doc. It's like you start constructing the doc in your head, then you move on to other docs and you go, okay, we know they were in this scene, talk about that only. But then, as Chris said, you lose some of the other gold then, which they may, when you get too kind of Bible with them, where A to Z, you'd lose sometimes where the stories that we didn't even know about. There's a story which we can't tell you the story, obviously, because obviously we'll rep the doc, but the story Robert just told Chris recently, which only came about, the story, because of another conversation Chris was having about another director, which we didn't know about this. So it's really hard. But I think Chris has said, we've learned a lot from Icon. Well, it's not called Icon anymore, Hollywood Dreams, where it's kind of maybe let the subject themselves talk. I mean, Robert does talk and talk. We've got 9 hours of Robert talking, but maybe
jealous.
But then it's time as well. You've got a studio and you've got only got it for the day. It's costing you $1,000 to get a studio for the day in LA with with hiring it, and you've got 15 people in. How much time do you give per person? But I think Chris is right. When we have the key people, I think we've got to just let them talk, and then we just got to give them that bit more freedom and just and contextualize. It's a bit like a story.
Yeah, and a bit of a pre-production kind of not pre-production, but we go in and God knows the planning that goes in. With Gary, one of our other producers, Mikey, as well. Rallying all these people is a bloody tough exercise, and that's why I don't do it. But you get them, and I think you just kind of think, well, we've got these people, we'll just ask them everything. And I think what for me anyway, my own personal mandate to myself is right. Next thing we do, which we've got a few plans, which unfortunately I can't say anything more on that at the moment. I'm already now in my head going like, right, I think what we haven't had before as much now is like the foresight in our documentaries. We've just kind of collated what we've got. Let's make the best of what we have here and, work to that. Whereas now I'm thinking a bit more like, okay, no, I need to know roughly in my head where this is going to go and what we're going to get out of it. And again, with that Rob Englund thing, we did the screening in Stitches, went down really, really well. We're really happy with it. I think our style is improved with each project. However, there's just things like, I wish we could have, we should have done that. However, thank God he had a few opinions, very small things, just additional elements he wanted added. And to actually be in a situation where, I brought that Panasonic GH5 with me, had to make a Scotch tape and chewing gum approach of like, right, well, let's get a meeting room. Cool, we got a meeting room. It's me, him, his wife, my wife. Pull the coffee table to the side. I used like boxes of Coke to stack the camera up on. Used my phone in his pocket as a lav mic and everything. And it's the same principle as getting Weller late in the day. It's actually, maybe it's a method we should look at or like intentionally do, where you actually like, let's get all these other pieces, let's see what we get out of all of this, and then we can kind of think, right, there's a gap there, there's a gap there, there's a gap there. And so that's what happened with RoboDoc, where we thought, God, there's some bits missing here and that, namely obviously Weller, but elements we wanted to complete other parts. It's like, oh, as long as he knows about it, get him to talk about it. And with Robert, we've got probably an extra 20 minutes worth of content. Now we're like, holy shit, that will link that bit to that bit. And it's all hindsight.
It's hindsight, yeah. I think one thing I've probably picked up from it is, I think we do have a narrative when we go in. We have a structure in your head, but that structure can change quite easily. And I think you can't be stuck to one structure. Like Pennywise, we went in going, this is not going to be a normal documentary about a making of. This is going to be about, the impact of clowns. We're going to interview all these people. It's going to be about fears. It's going to be about clown sightings, and then but just how then Pennywise, linked to those. And we ended up then doing a documentary about the making of Pennywise. Really, it kind of became a traditional documentary because of the wealth of information we got. Mm-hmm. So I think moving forward on any project, we've got to have a couple of narratives, kind of like in our heads.
Options. I think that was the tough thing with Pennywise. Actually, to be fair, there's so many ways to look at Pennywise. I mean, like there's so many things. As Gary said, there's the coulrophobia aspect, which at the time of production was all the rage. The clown sightings, or come back. You've got then the source material. So you talk about the book, the character himself, and God, you can unpack Pennywise in every which way because he's, as one of the people say in that documentary, he's layer upon layer upon layer upon layer, and all the subtext of the book and the kids. And then you've got this mini series which we've got a wealth of, but then you've got the remakes, or the cinematic iterations that were happening in time. So it's like, do we talk about everything? So there's maybe one criticism we probably had of some people is like, oh, this can't be about this because you haven't got the Andy Muschietti movies in there. It's like, maybe you should have called it Pennywise, the story of it, the TV movie, but it doesn't quite roll off the tongue that as a title. So, but we definitely, I mean, in terms of the length of time it took to edit it, I think actually of all our projects, that's the one where it's a bit like, we're going this way. Nope. We're going that way. No, we're going, oh my God, we're going all over these places. So, and it was just difficult to kind of navigate that. I think I'm pretty happy with what we've done. I mean, you see some people say, God, that clown section's fantastic. You see other people go like, it's a bit unnecessary and it doesn't fit in. For me personally, I think it is contextual. Here's your source material. John actually acquired that Stephen King footage at the start. So he's there in spirit. It's the genesis of the story. Then a little bit about its pre-production. I think it's quite nice to go a bit off piece, to be honest. What I really enjoyed about doing that coulrophobia section was it felt a little bit like Netflix. We're dealing with real world shit. It's
but we said
glorified DVD extra.
But we said from day one, from our point of view, the reason why a lot of people are scared of clowns is because of Tim Curry's portrayal of Pennywise. It's the clown that they see, and I think when we brought up in the 90s and 80s and you saw that clown, it impacted a lot of people's lives. So I felt very strongly that it was important to have the coulrophobia stuff in there because he's a big reason for that. Pennywise particularly, you get your Gacy's and that, but I'm tired. We cover Gacy, but I'm tired when people talk about Gacy all the time. He dressed up as a clown for charity event. He wasn't killing people dressed as a clown. And there's even in the new Dharma series, you've got footage of him drowning somebody in a bath dressed as a pogo the clown. The clown wasn't the killer. So the coulrophobia wasn't caused by John Wayne Gacy. A lot of it is because of Tim. And obviously people experiencing the circus, stuff like that, but I didn't remember going to the circus when I was a kid, really. It wasn't a big thing in where I lived. I lived born in a council estate. You didn't go to the circus in a council estate, you know what I mean? It wasn't a thing in Birmingham. Whereas Pennywise image was fucking there as a kid. It was on VHSs, it was in a video store. So I think
I always remember oh, go on, mate. Sorry.
Yeah, no. So you're, and I think Chris really pushed for the coulrophobia stuff. I think that was and I'm really proud of that section of the doc, like Chris is. I think it elevates the documentary to another level because it's about the impact of Pennywise, culturally. It's just about being an iconic figure, and now, particularly now, since our documentary's come out, since our documentary was filmed, Pennywise, the original Pennywise, has been it's kind of like blown up massively now compared to what it was in 2016 when we started filming. Because of the new film, the old Pennywise is renaissance with action figures, t-shirts, posters, and actually sometimes you see more of the old Pennywise than the new Pennywise. So I think it was really important. I think the choice we made, I'm proud of. I'm happy we made the choice that we did. You're going to get people moaning, going, why isn't that at all not in it? Why is Stephen King not in it? Because we asked them and they said no. It's as simple as that. We didn't go,
work with what you've got.
Yeah, I don't think we do. There's never a conversation we said, let's not bother getting Stephen King. Let's not bother getting.
As if you wouldn't ask him, or something.
Yeah, and I think sometimes people go,
oh, Tim wants to be involved, fuck it,
yeah. And I think the other thing was the Tim thing really for me. It's like people go, he's only in the documentary for like 15, 20 minutes. Yeah, because Tim Curry did the interview for us. A fantastic person to do it when he's not well. He wasn't well. And
Exactly.
it's like the fact he's sitting there when everybody told us beforehand, you're not going to get him. We were told that by people. There's no way Tim will do this. And he did it, and he did it because all he talks about at one stage was Rocky Horror Picture Show. And I think he did it because he wanted to talk about another film which he hadn't spoke about really publicly since being on set interviews. So, I think I'm really proud of what we achieved on it. And I think the creative choices are valid and important. And I don't know why I'm ranting now. I'm going on a rant, but I just
you get passion.
Yeah. I just think, sorry about the chlorophobia stuff. I think it's a really important part of that legacy of that film, chlorophobia is. So if we hadn't included it, I think we would have been injustice really to the legacy of that character and the impact he has had on that phenomenon. Really, that's my sales pitch.
Absolutely agree with everything you said there. Absolutely, one of my favorite parts of the whole documentary. I did enjoy that part, but
not much.
I enjoyed mostly all the practical effects stuff towards the end.
Yeah.
I'm a big fan of Bart Mixon, as you guys obviously are. Big fans of practical effects here at the Fright Club. I love the end. Obviously, it didn't work out quite the way they wanted to, and
But we've shown that now. We've shown the original Spider footage. It looks cool.
I thought it was great.
That was one of our mandates with the Spider section as well. I think it was kind of debated about and said, but I know for me, through and through, and maybe it was because of my opinion of being like, Jesus, that's quite rickety, that ending. Watching it quite late in the day, I admit. But that was one of my biggest mandates at the time on set. It was like, we've got to address this. I think there were a few voices going like, no, should we? But we're not out to sugarcoat shit. But we're not out to fight it at the same time. And I think actually it's one of the good feedbacks we had, to be honest. I saw something not long ago, people sort of saying we admire the kind of the candor of people. Tommy Lee Wallace would have loved to have made a better part 2, but hey, it is what it is, So I think it's important we don't try and say, oh, wasn't it great part 2? And wasn't that Spider Oscar worthy? It wasn't. So in that respect, that's why it's like, well, that's what we've got to get out of people. Why didn't it quite work?
Yeah, exactly.
You get a richer story in that respect because you can hear the kind of like elements of regret. And actually, in fact, the Spider in particular, what I loved, which hopefully means we don't bash it too much in the documentary, you see what could have been. But it's just circumstance of why, it was a miscommunication with, I think, was it the colorist as one example, one of the producers.
Yeah.
Not only of the producers we got in the documentary, but the TV producer sort of said that, no, we'll just quickly do it like this. And it's like, well, actually,
it's the frame rate as well, isn't it?
And it makes your mind tick a little bit.
It also allows people who have been criticised for a long time to get their story out there, and that's important. And we did the same on More Brains, Return of the Dead documentary, which Chris wasn't involved with, but he's been subsequently involved in other connections to that film. But we did it with Bill Munns, who was the original makeup designer on Return of the Living Dead, and he was criticised for years. I mean, destroyed for years publicly. And then when we did the book, we sold him the book originally, going, "We want you to tell your story. We want to tell what happened, why the effects weren't where you wanted them to be." And he talked about budget, Dan O'Bannon, and obviously pressure. And same as number 4 and 5 of that film as well. They're not very good films, 4 and 5, but why aren't they good films? What went wrong in that production line and that distribution? What affected the release of those movies? What pressure came from the finance, the backers? And the same with this, it goes back, we don't ever try and do exposés. We've all said that. We are passionate about what we do. We're not there to destroy people's reputations. We're there to celebrate their work and actually give them an opportunity to go, you know what, the Spider didn't work on screen. Why didn't it? As Chris said, it was down to grading, frame rate. It was down to, I think Norman says that literally, one of the makeup guys, that it was wheeled on the set. You shoot it once and you piss it off. Someone spent 9 weeks making that thing. Yeah. Someone spent 6 months designing it. And literally, as a filmmaker, the most important thing when a tight budget and tight, obviously, schedule is your cast and getting your actors, on par, getting them done. The prop is just a prop. You wheeled a prop in. I even remember one person saying to us on Hellraiser that the Cenobites were props. They were wheeled in as a prop, and we're like, okay. Now we know the iconic status of Cenobites. Now we know Pinhead and Butterball and Chatterer. But at the time, the filmmakers thought these are just props. You wheel them on, and they were like literally standing there blind and treated like crap. And now they're iconic, and the part of pop culture. So it's important for us to tell those stories. And I think the Spider particularly, it was really important, that story was told and celebrated.
Yeah, absolutely agree with everything you said there, Gary. I
Mm.
think that one of the things, going back to what you mentioned about society now and whenever like we were kids or whatever, I just I don't know about you guys, but I just loved everything when I was a kid. Like even if it was bad,
Mm.
looked bad on film, I loved the animatronics, I loved the prosthetics because I didn't know how it was done. And I just thought it was amazing. And now I think everything's kind of maybe criticized way too much.
Yeah,
And you have to celebrate some of the dodgy looking stuff as well because, as you
it's
said, people spend hours and hours and
well, yeah,
weeks working on
it's
this
it's
stuff.
And
it's
more,
go on,
there's
sorry.
more to talk about with this stuff, I think. And you can say this in any respect, couldn't you? Like, can you imagine? I mean, maybe you could for certain films, but there's so many films in this day and age now. We think, can I imagine a retrospective making of on that? Unless it's got like a rich story about the whole thing in terms of the
Yeah.
effects in particular. So, yeah, I just put on Adobe After Effects and I just use that plugin and
But what?
this is what
So the perfect example you're saying, Chris, is the remake. People criticize the Spider in the original, and and bashed that for years. This remake's going to come out with all the cinematic version. It's going to be brilliant. It's going to have a spider, and all it was a CGI. Bill Skarsgård says now. I always get Chris knows I'm really crap with names, pronouncing names, but literally in his costume with his just his spider legs running around, and actually, you know what? Is that as any better than what we saw in the original? At least the original is based on the book creature. Maybe I think, as we said, that what we did in the remake, I think we're probably right in terms of when the spider's destroyed, it becomes Pinhead again. Pinhead, but no, I hope it's not Pinhead.
That would have been weird.
Yeah. It becomes Pennywise again. That's probably a mistake I think they made on the original TV series. But I think sometimes we can criticize what's gone before, and actually, with CGI now, as Chris said, and After Effects, any better. It's just, you can tell it's not there. And I think with the Spider and New One,
there's
it's just it's not
there's just
great.
nothing to talk about in that respect.
Yeah.
Do you know
No,
what I mean?
no.
I think what you've got to love is that and I think as again I'll use the term which I absolutely adore from Tommy Lee Wallace. It's the Scotch tape and chewing gum approach. I like to think I kind of apply that to my day-to-day life. I'm doing things with my bloody camera, and Robert England's interview for God's sakes, the last one. I'm like, right, if I take my phone and I put that in his pocket and this and that, I'm sure there's loads of other people doing that out there. But it's having that mindset, and I think in a way,
Being creative,
it's what they say as well, don't they? In our docs, a lot of them, with the limited resource, we really had to think outside the box, and I think it's a much more heroic endeavor to see what these people did versus big studio film. Yeah, we used that effect and we used that source, third party plugin, whatever, and this and that. So again, that's why I just stress I don't think you're going to necessarily see you don't really have the icons of the day in terms of effects makeup artists now. You don't have your Savini's, Dick Smiths, and Rick Bakers and all that now. There's you've got Nicotero, K&B, and all that still ticking over, which is great. But I'm struggling to think of any notable rock star effects makeup artist outside of those guys who are sort of still carrying on. I can't think. I think Damien Leone's actually doing it. I didn't realize that until watching Terrified 2. It's like, holy shit, he actually did the makeup effects as well. That's actually very impressive. He's a bit of a jack of all trades, that guy. But again, which is good to see, actually. I suppose in a way, looping in Terrifier again now with the whole clowns thing. It's very excessive, that film, having watched Terrified 2. It's like, Jesus. However, nonetheless, as crass as much of it might be, in a very entertaining way, actually, it's quite nice to be like, oh, look, it's meaty, you can touch it. Do you know what I mean? Like, that is practical effects, and I can almost about imagine what they use to create that effect. So, it's kind of quite nice to see a little bit of a renaissance, but I don't think it'll ever be a mainstream thing again. And that's why I think these documentaries, as I said before, your Friday the 13th, your Nightmare on Elm Street, Pennywise is no different, Robocop's the same. Fright Night even as well, where you can kind of go like, oh yeah, it's so cool to see how these people did this stuff. They used clay, they were using toxins that were, lethal to the lungs, but they didn't know that at the time. God bless them, they're still taking over.
Some of them.
God knows what's in their system, or what it did to their heads. So yeah, I think that's one of the things we absolutely adore about these projects is, you're not just going to be told, I pushed a button. No. We did this. We did a large scale one. We did a small scale one. We took this approach, that approach. And so, yeah, it's nice to celebrate those people's work, to be fair.
Yeah, brilliant. I wish there was more films that were doing more practical. I do think that it is coming back a little bit now.
Yeah.
But I'd like to see more of it as always. But just want to shout out to the Pennywise documentary. The story of it is now available on Blu-ray, DVD, and digital download. So go to your HMV and buy it. And if you don't want to go to the shop, go and download it somewhere legally, of course. Pay for it.
Yeah, legally.
Um, please go out and buy it and help support the great work that both Gary and Chris are doing and their team are doing with these amazing documentaries. Because as fans, we love them. So, but that's all we've got time for. Thanks again, guys.
Thank
All
you.
the best for future projects, and hopefully, I'll be chatting to you soon about Robert England or something
Thank
else.
you.
Absolutely, mate.
Yeah.
We'll be back.